God is dead, but truth is a woman. There is no God. What we used to think of as true can no longer be thought of as true. But now we have to think truth is a woman. What does that mean? It means that she must be enticed and gently persuaded, but also dazzled and romanced in order to reveal herself to us. But that's the modern thing. It's about rephrasing the idea of truth. It used to be God. God is alive. God is the truth. Jesus is the Word, and the Word is true. But then God died, and as soon as he did, there was a need to reframe truth as something else. And Nietzsche prefaces Beyond Good and Evil with supposing truth to be a woman. Okay. Well, there's other ways of conceiving of truth. I'm sure Heidegger might have something to say about it. There must be some relation, speaking of Heidegger, between being and truth. What exactly that is not clear, at least at the outset. But the relation is that whatever it is, whatever it is to be, it must be true to say that it is to be. If that is, it can be put into words. So if Heidegger were to say something along the lines of Dasein is whatever, or being is so-and-so, we would like to think that he's telling the truth. And supposing that he isn't telling the truth, he's saying something that might entice truth to reveal herself. But then we can see here the continuation of the project that I would argue was inaugurated by Nietzsche, of writing in a way not so as to commit words and ideas and concepts to paper and make them able to be transmitted to others, but to create a book which is itself an active agent in dismantling the preconceptions of its readers. And now Heidegger, I think, clearly has that in him as well, in that when you read him, it's not so much the argument that you need to follow, but his attitude towards existence and being and truth. And we get this line, maybe not a straight line, but a line, through from Nietzsche, where he treats truth as a woman who needs to be enticed and romanced, to Nietzsche, where he treats truth as something, he treats being as something which isn't to be got at directly. Or perhaps is to be got at directly, but is to be not simply asked after, because that would be sloppy. It would be presumptuous. It's a game, it's a flirtation, as Nietzsche would suggest. But what do we do then? So we know God is dead. Which is to say that we know truth. It's not objective. We can't actually find it. And that's obviously confirmed by Bertrand Russell and Wittgenstein, and to give them credit where due, the postmodernists, which is to say, every attempt we've made to put our finger right on what truth means, to make a logical argument, for instance, or to make some kind of scientific system that is watertight, or to demonstrate the the completeness of our mathematical systems. I'm of course referring to Gödel. And with the postmodernists, to demonstrate the integrity of our language. We've all failed. There seems to be an ambiguity in language, and there's no system that seems to encapsulate the scientific method and distinguish it from pseudoscience or even non-science. There's nothing. There's no. It's been proven that by Gödel that a mathematical system cannot be complete. So God is dead, really, truly. But when Nietzsche says God is dead, he doesn't necessarily mean what Bertrand Russell means when he says, not Bertrand Russell. When Nietzsche says God is dead, he means our belief in him is dead. The truth is dead. Because God was the bedrock, he was the foundation for all the truth. And if he's dead, then truth is dead. But then he gives us this little nugget of wisdom. And he tells us to suppose that truth is a woman. And that all previous philosophers have been trying to entice her with very much inappropriate means. They've been cumbersome and ponderous and you might say arrogant, not sufficiently subtle or responsive. There's a lack of attunement to the situation, which is missing. There's a denial, you might say, of the senses and of the immediate reality of the moment, over drawing a line from dogma into action. So for instance, in the person of Kant, we might say that he spent a long time bringing his system into being. Must have been an immense creative effort for him. And of course, he would have had to ignore all those bypaths which would have led him astray. That's natural for any system of dogma, that will be led astray. But of course, is Nietzsche equally guilty of that same crime? You must accept that he, of course, was very subtle. But he may not. He's posed a problem which it seems almost would be impossible for him not to stumble upon himself. The truth is a woman and therefore demands to be enticed and romanced rather than simply to be bushwhacked through to. Surely bushwhacking is not something that Nietzsche would set out to do. But then it seems as though the spirit of conquest is very deeply involved with Nietzsche's concept of truth, or at least of nature. And if anyone's a critic of separating nature and truth, I think it's Nietzsche. He says famously, "Oh, you Stoics, you noble Stoics, you want to live according to nature. But is nature not overcoming violence, the will to subjugate and to act in line with my values? How on earth could you possibly be living according to nature when it is exactly that demand which you are denying? That demand which is so natural, which is in fact, following Nietzsche, will to power, and which is the fundamental pattern underlying the world. Well, let's think about that for a while. Let's think about will to power as the underlying action in the world. You see, a physicist might say something like, disorder increases, order breaks down, and energy flows to the lowest place. That might be a physicist's description of the fundamental recurring pattern. Nietzsche, however, says it's the will to power. Now, what is the will to power? Well, there's an entity in the world, and it has some kind of nature, has a direction. And it's about behaving in accordance with its nature. For a Greek question, which Nietzsche considers to be the fundamental process. How does that differ to the scientist's theory? Well, the scientist, the physicist rather, considers he imagines that the system is always at bottom material. He has a mechanistic view. It's as though there was something, it obeys a set of rules. Right down at the bottom are the rules. Whereas for Nietzsche, right down at the bottom is will. Now, if we were to reconcile these two, we might say, yes, well, it seems that things do act in accordance with rules, although they're not determined by those rules. It wasn't by virtue of Schrödinger's equations that quantum particles started to behave the way that they do. If such a causal process were possible, then physicists would be the actual magicians of our time. But there is still a consistent pattern. Now you might say there's a pattern. If we have simple entities, if we have fools, they're all in possession of a will to power. And we'll see that they all act in the same exact way, rather than the way the glorious, conquering man, as Nietzsche imagines him, is that he possesses the same will to power as the hordes. But he is distinct among them in his competence and his ability to fulfill his own virtue. He's better at being himself. The great man, becomes himself. He manifests his potential. He has a nature, and it's about becoming as virtuous as possible in the ancient sense. Virtue, as in, he has a nature, he has a character, and it's acting more and more in line with that character, which is the distinguishing feature of the great man. Whereas the hordes don't. They get stuck in ruts. And they make no distinct effort to manifest their latent potentialities for being in a way which is most characteristic of them.